Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Reid. You'll remember that before lunch I asked you some questions about an exchange of emails between May 2021 and July 2021 involving a man called Gary Thomas, a former Post Office investigator.
Yes.
And the suggestion made by him that there existed in his time a bonus scheme that was related to the volume of successful prosecutions and or the volume of recovery under the Proceeds of Crime Act.
I do.
And you noted that the correspondence had, in the final analysis, been sent to your personal assistant, but you had not much recollection about it.
That's correct.
I have had helpfully drawn to my attention a document that maybe rounds this issue off a little. Can we look at that, please? Poll 00142412. And if we go to the last page, please, which is page 7, you will see this is a note from Peters & Peters, solicitors, of the 24th of August 2022. If we go back to the first page, in the tram lines at the top, it's a disclosure note in relation to, amongst other things, number 2, a review of bonus incentivization schemes. It seems that it was addressed to defendants or putative defendants and perhaps the CCRC, because in paragraph 1, it's noted that in accordance with its ongoing disclosure obligations, the respondent, that's Post Office, is continuing to review material not previously considered for disclosure. And then paragraph 2, this note is intended to address 3 matters, the second of which was a Post Office review of bonus incentivization schemes relating to Post Office employees involved in the investigation and prosecution of criminal offences. And if we go to the part of the note that concerns that, that's on page 3, at the foot of the, paragraph 13. It says Post Office has conducted a review of material relating to the bonus incentivization scheme that applied to employees involved in criminal investigations and prosecutions in order to determine whether it operated so as to incentivize or encourage improper conduct capable of leading to unfairness in the investigations and prosecutions. And if we scroll down, please, 15 says the Post Office is providing the note to disclose the fact of the review, to allow appellants to make representations in relation to the review, the relevance of the review, or the facts of any particular appeal. Scope and ambit. If we go over the page, please. I should have looked at footnotes, the footnote at the foot of the page. The review was conducted by Peters & Peters as part of the post-conviction disclosure exercise. If we carry on, please. Scope and ambit, 17,000 documents. This included, where available, HR files related to individual members of the criminal law and security teams. Some interviews were conducted, paragraph 17, with current and former Post Office security managers. And then the note splits out its conclusions into findings relating to the security team and then subsequently findings relating to the criminal law team. I'll just look at those relating to the security team, which is what Mr. Thomas was a member of. The Post Office security team operated a bonus and incentivization scheme during the period between 1999 and 2013. The scheme included, among others, objectives relating to the recovery of Post Office losses through criminal confiscation or compensation proceedings, or by repayment direct to Post Office during the course of an investigation or prosecution. The recovery of Post Office losses, typically expressed as a percentage of losses caused by fraud activity, was a recorded team objective within the Post Office security team. The achievement of this would account for a proportion, albeit a small one, of the total bonus awarded to the Post Office security team that were entitled to receive bonuses. These objectives were concerned solely with team outcomes, not individual performance. And then paragraph 21. The level of bonus would depend principally upon the individual's performance, development review, score at an annual appraisal. Paragraph 22. The review identified no evidence that the bonus incentivization scheme applicable to the security team was based on the number of prosecutions, convictions, or recommendations. Peters and Peters collected bonus data and conducted an exercise to identify whether there was any correlation between the number of convictions and level of bonus. No correlation was found. 24 notes that charging decisions were taken by lawyers, not by investigators. The inquiry's heard a lot of evidence on these issues, I should say,
yes,
as to the accuracy of what is said here. Over the page, it goes on to the criminal law team. And so essentially, it seems that there was a bonus and incentivization scheme that was linked to recovery of funds, but not the number of prosecutions.
Yep. That would be my interpretation as well.
Yes. Of course, in order for there to be recovery of funds, there needed to be a successful prosecution to start with.
Yes.
Were you involved in this in any way? Did you have any knowledge of this exercise to investigate the extent to which there was a bonus or incentivization scheme?
No, I don't recall it, actually. Not something that I do recall.
So looking at it, it seems that part of what Mr. Thomas said would broadly align with what the review found,
yeah,
but part of it would not, in that there wasn't a metric relating to the number of successful prosecutions, but there was in relation to recoveries.
That's what I would interpret too.
Thank you. Thank you, that can come down. Can I turn to the, or continue with the topic of the interaction between those that have been implicated in the wrongs of the past and the payment of compensation?
Yes.
Would you agree, as a general rule, that if one perpetrates a wrong, you should promptly admit the wrong and seek to rectify the problem that you have caused?
Yes, I would.
Would you agree that it has been established that the Post Office devastated the lives of sub-postmasters and the lives of their families through the use of criminal investigations, criminal prosecutions, and civil claims?
Yes, I would.
That those wrongs took many years to surface?
Agreed.
Would you agree that when acting as a private prosecutor, a public corporation, the Post Office utilised its status and history to silence its opponents?
Yes, I would.
And would you agree that it's been established that the Post Office denied postmasters disclosure that would have enabled them, firstly, to contest the charges that were wrongly laid at their door, but secondly, to seek to remove unjust convictions that had been wrongly obtained against them?
Yes, I would.
And is that why, in light of those recognitions, you understand that, or you say that Post Office should not have been involved in dealing with compensation for those wrongs?
Yes, it is.
Why was Post Office involved in the administration of compensation for dealing with those wrongs?
Ostensibly because the shareholder, the government, wanted us to experience some of the discomfort that had been caused by the Post Office and therefore be involved in the redress. My personal view, and one that I've expressed consistently since this decision was made by the shareholder, was that it seems astonishing to me that an organisation that has been involved in the investigation and the prosecution of postmasters in this light should be involved in redress. It should be done independently, and I've been consistent with that view, for 3 or 4 years now.
I've heard the analogy suggested, it's like putting a burglar in charge of deciding whether to give stolen goods back. That may be strong language.
Yes, I think that's strong language, but notwithstanding your analogy, I do think that the confidence of the process and the independence of the process would have been enhanced if the Post Office had been ring-fenced and removed from this, or not even considered as opposed to removed.
And you essentially explained it on the basis that the government said that the Post Office needed to feel some of the pain.
Yes.
Was that phrase used?
I looked at my contemporaneous notes, and I think I may well have disclosed something to this effect, that the way it was portrayed to me was that Treasury were of the opinion that the chaos, I think was the word that was used, had been caused by the Post Office. There was a desire for the Post Office to experience some of the discomfort that had been caused. You could understand why that might be the case, but I just think it's missing the point completely.
Given your understanding that it was, in principle, morally wrong for the Post Office to act as the custodian or the decision maker in the provision of a large range of compensation, wasn't it doubly important to ensure that those that were entrusted with that function within the Post Office had no connection with the past?
Yes, I think that is the case. I mean, I would describe it that structurally we have a problem here. The cause is wrong, and everything that has flowed from that cause has been problematic for us. The building in of independence has been critical to the schemes that are operated by the Post Office, and that has had varying degrees of success, I would argue.
The fact of the matter is that those that have been involved or are implicated in the events of the past have nonetheless had a role in making decisions as to compensation.
I don't think making decisions. I think going back to the conversation we had before lunch, I was clear about the number of reds as they were described, and we were very clear that we had ensured that any reds, inverted commas, were not involved in decision-making associated with either offers or anything of that nature. They may well have been involved in shortfall analysis, they may well have been involved in disclosure exercises, but not involved in decision-making associated with compensation.
To take an example, Mr. Williams, Roderick Williams, was an important figure in the Post Office's steering committee that drove the defence of the Post Office in the group litigation.
Yes.
And he went on to work on the Shortfalls Remuneration Committee.
That may well be true. I couldn't confirm that.
If it is true, and I suggest it is.
Right. And
do you see a problem?
I do see your problem, and Mr. Williams is not involved in that activity anymore.
Did it cross the mind of the board or the general executive that the continuing, and I think you've described it as inexcusable delay in the delivery of compensation might be that the wrong people were involved in the provision of it?
I don't think expressly like that. I think when we've looked at disclosure as being a sort of core reason for the delay in compensation, or one of the core reasons for the delay in compensation, I think there have been other technical reasons and technical drivers rather than some of the individuals that you're alluding to.
Can I turn to the Central Investigations Unit, as it was initially called? Just by way of background, can you help by confirming the following? the Central Investigations Unit, or the CIU, was established in the Post Office in February 2022.
Correct.
And that was established as the Post Office's central investigation function.
Yes.
It's now known as the Assurance and Complex Investigations Team, ACNI.
That's correct.
Can you help by confirming that the establishment of the CIU in February 22 followed a review undertaken by KPMG between June and August 2021?
Yes, Project Birch, I think.
And Project Birch, the KPMG report, was, would you agree, heavily critical of the approach within Post Office to investigations at that time?
Yes.
The report for the transcript, no need to turn it up, is poll 00423697. Can you help by confirming that a number of GE papers were produced following the Project Birch report and decisions taken by the GE on the approach to investigations?
Yes, that's correct.
They were put before the board, and if we can look at that, please, on the 27th of September 2022, poll 00448320. So this is essentially a paper to the board as a result of prior decision making by the GE, sponsored by Mr. Fote, for a meeting on the 27th of September 2022. And if we go to paragraph 2.4, please. Thank you. It's our recommendation that the minimum remit is option 4, that needn't concern us. This would allow Post Office to act in determining facts relating to situations ranging from allegations of theft or fraud by postmasters or their staff, using or misusing Post Office systems or functions where either or both Post Office and the postmaster are victims, through to misconduct or process failings in Post Office and the subsidiaries. The Horizon issue identified a failure to investigate. I think that means the Horizon issue's judgment identified a failure to investigate beyond the postmaster in determining culpability. Best practice, and in some situations the law, requires all reasonable lines of inquiry to be followed, whether they point away or towards the considered investigative hypothesis, as it is the truth that is sought, not that a case is to be made against the selected individual. By investigating wider than the postmasters, for example, their staff, where relevant, we demonstrate the Post Office has learned from the past and would seek to determine actual culpability, if any, which is treating the postmasters fairly. Allegations of misconduct by postmasters will be explicitly included in the proposed remit. And then if we go to page 6, please. And if we scroll down. Sorry, just scroll up, please. This sets out the proposed operating model and the interaction of the CIU with external agencies, in particular the police.
Yep.
As a government organisation, Post Office is viewed by law enforcement agencies differently from a privately owned company. It's unfortunately fact that LEAs deprioritise most reports of crime made by government-linked organisations if made in the traditional way. 4.2, suspected offences with an element of dishonesty will form the vast majority, if not all, of our criminal investigations and potential referrals. 4.3. It's proposed, and then a summary of this would this be fair, that the CIU would conduct an internal investigation, but with the intention of reporting any alleged criminality to the police?
We touched on this topic yesterday, and as you say, this is a proposal to the board. I think maybe if I could take a step back and just describe what the activities of the CIU are today and what it does, it might shed some light on where we're going with the CIU more broadly. There are 4 or 5 very specific activities that the ACNI are involved in. First and foremost, it's the whistleblowing, and there's a ring-fence team that look after whistleblowing and speak up. It is independent, and that's what it does. The second element is that it investigates those issues of more than £100,000 potential loss within the sort of post office environment. That could be branches or anywhere else. It obviously is the single point of contact for liaising with LEAs, and it's important, we felt, to have a single place to do that. And it acts in 2 other ways. It looks into and governs the activity of the senior leadership group and the board if there are investigations of conduct into those individuals. And finally, it provides some assurance for the organisation in terms of the way it conducts its investigations. I think the genesis of this work in terms of Project Birch was particularly the fact that there were disparate groups across the organisation who were doing various levels of investigation for various reasons with inconsistent levels of training and support. So the important element here, I think, is that the evolution of this issue is that the ACNI team interplay with law enforcement agencies when there are organised crime and larger issues associated with fraud or money laundering or the like, as opposed to the inference that the ACNI would be doing individual investigations into specific post offices' discrepancies or losses. They have to be of a size greater than £100,000 for this team to be involved in any of that kind of activity. I don't know if that helps. Just
I mean, that sets out the position now.
Yes.
I want to explore in a slightly more detail
yes.
What was proposed and then what happened.
Right.
If we go over the page, please. And if we scroll down. And then over the page. And keep scrolling. And again. I think that's probably the end. Was the KPMG Project Birch report circulated to the board?
I don't know. I don't believe so. I think it was in draft form, so I'm not sure that it went to the board.
Was the Project Birch report circulated to the General Executive?
Yes, I believe so.
Did you see it?
Yes, I believe I did.
Did you agree with the criticisms in it of the Post Office's then approach
Yes, I mean,
to investigations?
My recollection of that was that they were inconsistent, that they were conducted across the business without levels of assurance and control, and more importantly, they were conducted potentially by area managers, people who weren't qualified to investigate. And part of the recommendation was that we needed to bring this together to drive some consistency, and that is what has happened as a consequence of Project Birch.
Do you know why the Project Birch report may have not gone before the board?
No, I don't, actually, no.
When the board was asked to approve this new approach to investigations, were any questions raised by the board as to the approach that was then being taken to investigations?
I don't recall specifically, I'm afraid.
can you recall whether questions were raised designed to question assumptions about culpability or assumptions made on the way to substantiating losses?
No, I don't recall.
The CIU team, I think, became properly operational in January 2023.
Yes,
And Mr. Bartlett, John Bartlett, was appointed
that's correct.
in February 2023 to head it, I think.
Yes.
Now, the inquiry, and I'm not going to go into the detail, has heard evidence from Mr. Jacobs on his experience of investigation by this CIU team. Has that, what Mr. Jacobs has said to the board, given the board any pause for thought as to the way in which the CIU were conducting its investigations?
I think it will have given the board some concern. I think the Project Pineapple, Project Venus experience, as I mentioned before the break, the words I used were heavy-handed. I think there is certainly a level of reflection associated with that. What we do know is that the ACNI team is stretched, and it is involved in too many investigations. That may well be a cultural reflection on the nervousness and broader nervousness in the business that currently pervades as a consequence, as we discussed before, of the inquiry and the scrutiny that is occurring. I think there is a potential lack of judgment at times, and I think that is something that we are, as a board, conscious of. But at the same time, as we discussed yesterday, the board is particularly aware that there is no presumption of guilt when it comes to loss recovery, when it comes to investigating discrepancies, when it comes to looking at issues associated with Horizon and in branches, and most importantly, that activity in terms of working with the postmasters is conducted by the retail team and not by this specialist team. This specialist team is ostensibly there to work with law enforcement agencies when organised crime is identified, and vice versa when we identify it as well, as opposed to I think the impression that is being given is that this team is involved in the day-to-day activity associated with branches. That isn't the case at all.
Given that at the time that the board was asked to approve the new approach to investigations set out in that noting paper, the Common Issues Judgment, the Horizon Issues Judgment, and the Court of Appeal Criminal Division's decision in Hamilton had all been handed down, decided, were
Yes.
then well established. How did the board satisfy itself as to the steps that were to be taken by the CIU to substantiate, in the words of the policy, losses, or the words of the paper, losses in branches before proceeding to act upon them?
Well, I think the board made it very clear that if what you're suggesting is that if we are to work with any law enforcement agencies around potential losses, then clearly the board needs to be involved in making those decisions, which is what is the position it has today. So if we are to work with LEAs in any sense of the word, it needs to be something that is sanctioned by the board. But broadly, where LEAs ask for information, where they ask for cooperation, we should and will provide it.
I was looking at it the other way round. The
Right.
paper envisages an investigation by the CIU in which a loss will be, quote, substantiated. I'm asking whether any particular attention was paid by the board to that issue? How is a loss, in inverted commas, substantiated?
No, I don't think the board specifically got into that level of detail.
And what about the General Executive? This being an issue of controversy,
Yes.
the substantiation of whether a loss had in fact occurred at all, and if so, who had caused it.
I don't think the group executive got into that extent. This would be something that the retail committee would be more focused on than ACNI, particularly as I mentioned before, when it comes to identification of discrepancies, when it comes to mismatches, when it comes to transaction issues. That is something that will be specifically in the domain of the retail team.
I think having sat in this room, you will have heard the evidence produced by YouGov concerning the levels of satisfaction and dissatisfaction with the operation of the Horizon system currently, and the extent to which faults within it seem to cause unexplained losses. Can we look at that, please, by way of context to the questions that I'm going to ask? The executive summary will suffice. So EXPG 607. Page 4, please. I'm going to whiz through this because we've heard the evidence
Yes, we have.
already, but it's important context to the questions about enforcement action. In summary, the survey on sub-postmasters, the SPM survey, found that nearly half of the SPM surveyed were dissatisfied with how the Horizon IT system currently operates, compared to 25% who were satisfied and 25% were very dissatisfied. So 75% were dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. 42% were dissatisfied with the training that they had received, compared to 25% who were satisfied. 70% said that they suffered from screen freezes. 68% suffered from loss of connection. 57% said that they had experienced unexplained discrepancies. 19% said that they had recorded unexplained transactions. 14% experienced missing transactions. 10% complained of double entry of transactions. 65% of the sub-postmasters surveyed experienced those issues at least once a month. In relation to the contract provision, 15%, only 15%, said that they had received a full copy of their contract, scrolling down. Since the Common Issues judgment in March 2019, 55% felt that the terms of their contract were unfair, 32% very unfair. And then to page 5, 48% of sub-postmasters felt dissatisfied with their role, 31% felt satisfied, 72% felt undervalued, 60% disagreed with the proposition that the Post Office Board listened to their views, 74% disagreed that the Post Office understands the concerns of sub-postmasters. 52% thought that did not think that the Post Office was a good place to work. 55% thought that the Post Office had not learned the lessons from the past. If we go on to page 28, please, at paragraph 4.5. In relation to shortfalls, around 7 in 10, 69% of sub-postmasters reported they'd experienced an unexplained discrepancy on Horizon since January 2020. Those have been working between 6 and 10 years, most likely to have reported this experiencing, up at 83%. at 21 years least likely at 61%. Of the sub-postmasters surveyed who reported experienced an unexplained discrepancy since January 2020, 1 in 3 had done so as frequently as a few times a month, 17%, or once a month, 18%. 25% who had experienced an unexplained discrepancy said they had done so a couple of times a year, 8% once a year, 9% less than once a year. That's all represented in figure 15. The vast majority, 89% of sub-postmasters surveyed who reported experiencing unexplained discrepancy since January 2020 said that a typical discrepancy was less than £1,000. 50% who said less than £200, 39% between £200 and £999. 8% reported a typical discrepancy was between £1,000 and £9,999. That's all reported in figure 16 if we scroll down. All sub-postmasters surveyed who experienced a discrepancy reported these were shortfalls, 98%. A third had surpluses, with sub-postmasters able to having experienced both. Over the page, please. When asked how discrepancies were typically resolved, it was most common for sub-postmasters to report using their branch's money or to have resolved it themselves, 74%. More likely amongst those who've been a sub-postmaster for 11 to 20 years, up at 82%. And then there's a quote from one sub-postmaster: "The system is still flawed at month end. We've seen a discrepancy where a cheque has been shown to be cashed on our system, which created a shortfall. We do not cash cheques as a local branch, and this put us in a discrepancy when we went to the business support centre. They didn't resolve the issue properly. We took on the loss personally." Figure 17, if we scroll down, shows how discrepancies have generally been resolved. 74% resolved by the postmaster themselves or using the branch's own money. So the questions arising from that, Mr. Reid, these statistically significant results that concern issues with the frequency, volume and amount of discrepancy transactions make dismal reading, don't they?
They're very disappointing and surprising.
Would you agree that they mean that the obligation in the contract upon Post Office to maintain oversight and investigate any apparent shortfalls or alleged shortfalls, and whether or not there was indeed any shortfall at all, is failing?
I think where the review and dispute button is used, where the branch support centre is engaged, where the branch support and reconciliation team are involved, we have good metrics to support that progress is being made in terms of how we engage with postmasters, how we work with postmasters to identify issues, and how that works. So the reason I say surprising is that the internal statistics don't necessarily mirror these particular results. So that's why it's disappointing, and that's why we need to dig into it further and try and understand some of the underlying issues. I'm conscious that I think it was only 14% of the postmaster population responded to the survey, despite the fact that we wrote to them in hard copy, sent them emails. It's more an issue of engagement, which I think is the one that we are challenged by. What we notice is that where we reach postmasters from an engagement and from an awareness and from from an engagement perspective, we are getting better results. I think it's noticeable that those who've been postmasters for less than 2 years, for those who have been involved in some of our forums, some of our support groups, some of the way that we are changing internally, have reported better results. There's no question, though, that these are disappointing and we've got more to do. And I think despite the changes we've made to the branch assurance team, despite the changes we've made to the network support and reconciliation team, despite the teams that now go out and help individual postmasters specifically with discrepancies or issues that emerge in branches where we can try and resolve, we're not getting the same level of traction, even though we are communicating and engaging with postmasters in a very different way when discrepancies or problems emerge with Horizon. We are utterly transparent when that happens. We use our branch hub tool, we use our memo view tool, we engage with postmasters. But we're obviously not getting through to everybody, and you obviously experienced it as well in your survey, that we have more to do to try and win the trust and win the confidence of postmasters, because these results certainly don't suggest that we are making the progress that we would like to have made.
I've got to ask you bluntly, how is it possible that in late 2024 the same issues with shortfalls are occurring with postmasters paying them off themselves?
I just don't know why postmasters feel the need to do that. We have been absolutely explicit when we've investigated shortfalls that where it cannot be established how and why that shortfall has occurred, we are not imposing upon postmasters to pay off or pay it themselves through their own money. We've been very, very clear with that. Maybe we're not getting that message clearly through, but there is no enforcement by the Post Office in that situation at all, and it's important that we convey that. So that's the engagement piece that I've spoken to the team about over the last 3 weeks since this survey was delivered, and I know that the acting CEO is working with the retail team to try and get under the skin of what it is that is and why it is that we're not engaging in the way that postmasters can understand. Because clearly, as I say, this is a disappointing set of scores.
Has it occurred to the board or the general executive that there may be a connection between the fact that a very low percentage of sub-postmasters report having received the new contracts, 15%, and the fact that many postmasters, and notably more of the longer-term ones, are still paying off shortfalls from Horizon system errors, i.e. the changes that have been wrought under the contract
Haven't got through
because they haven't been given the contracts?
I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the restatement exercise was back in 2019, which is when we restated contractually to reflect the changes in the CIJ, was very quickly and very comprehensively done. This suggests to me this is more about engagement as opposed to contractual. This is about behaviours, and this is about the Post Office today not getting its message through about how we want to help and support postmasters to improve their operational performance and, more importantly, to ensure that discrepancies don't occur. Now, we know that there are anything up to 10,000 transaction corrections in any given month, which, if you think about 11,500 branches, is approximately one transaction correction per month. So, we know that with the vast amount of cash and the vast amount of stamps that we are moving between branches and the centre, problems do occur. But the fundamental issue from our perspective is we are standing by with the branch support centre, with our reconciliation support team to help postmasters get to the bottom, and the presumption of guilt is no longer applied. This is absolutely about presumption of innocence and making sure that we understand the issue, and then we can communicate the problem more broadly to our postmasters as well.
If it's right that only 15% of postmasters have access to the new contract, then only 15% of them would be aware of the new post-Horizon Issues Judgment, Common Issues Judgment terms.
No, I don't believe so. We communicated the restatement exercise to all postmasters. So if that needs to be re-engineered, then we need to do more to do so. I don't I don't personally believe that it's a contractual issue that is affecting the way that we are engaging with postmasters. I don't think it's about contract. I think it's about behaviour, and we've clearly got more to do.
When a postmaster pays off a shortfall, is the cause of the shortfall investigated?
We only invite postmasters to pay for shortfalls when there is an agreement between the post office and that individual. If they believe that there is no causality associated with either error or carelessness on behalf of the postmaster themselves, they press the review and dispute button, and we go into a deeper investigation. But if at the conclusion of that we can't find any agreed cause between the two parties, we do not enforce the postmaster to make good that loss.
I follow that, and I've understood that to be the position, as you say, it should be in practice. But taking this survey at face value, there are still, in numerical terms, perhaps hundreds of people who, when faced with a shortfall, simply pay it back.
I know.
Right? Now, I think that's what Mr. Beer may just have been asking you about. In those circumstances, presumably, nothing happens.
Well, we don't know.
You don't know. The money goes to the post office, and that's the end of it.
Well, we don't know, sir, who's paying money, and that is troubling, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That can come down, thank you. Does Post Office conduct surveys of this kind in relation to the extent to which postmasters experience Horizon issues that lead to shortfalls in branches?
We do two things. We do two surveys a month. Two surveys a year with the postmasters, a pulse survey in the autumn and then a full survey in January, February, March, where we ask the postmasters about the issues that are affecting them, and so that we do it consistently every year so we can build up a trend of what is going on. But we also have a number of different...
Just before you move
Yes.
on from that answer, I was asking specifically about issues with surveys, asking the types of questions that YouGov put to the full cohort of sub-postmasters.
Yes is the short answer to that question, perhaps not to the same extent in exactly the same wording, but we do ask about the issues that they are facing, we do ask about Horizon, and we do ask about problems that are associated with it, whether or not we're communicating discrepancies appropriately, whether or not we're communicating issues appropriately, how best to do that, which vehicles and which tools do postmasters like to be communicated through and with, whether that's area managers, whether that's through branch hub, whether that's through communication directly to the counter itself. So yes is the short answer. We do that.
You said in an answer, a couple of answers back, that only 14% of the total sub-postmaster cohort replied to this part of the survey.
I think that's correct, yes.
Did you mean by that answer to say that reliance should not be placed on the results?
No, what I meant was we didn't manage to engage everybody to take part, and so therefore I think it's not unreasonable to ask the question, people who want to engage with a survey will have an issue that is on their minds. I'm just questioning whether the other 85% had an issue.
As the chairman has said, that the 1,000 that did respond to this part of the survey, a very significant proportion of them, hundreds, 74% said that they were paying back shortfalls themselves. That in and of itself, irrespective of the cohort that did not reply, is a significant number of sub-postmasters.
It is troubling, yes.
In your witness statements, you don't appear to discuss in any detail the Post Office's continuing investigations and enforcement actions against sub-postmasters, and in particular, the mechanisms for obtaining data from Horizon. Was there a reason for that, or was it just because of the questions that you were asked?
I think it was the questions I was asked. Yes.
Okay. Can we look at some material relating to that, please? Bays 40789. This is a quarterly shareholder meeting. Can you just explain briefly, if you could, what the quarterly shareholder meetings consist of?
Yeah, certainly. It's a three-way meeting effectively between DBT officials, UKGI officials, and Post Office senior leaders, in the main non-board members, with the exception of the chair. And we agree. It's a quarterly meeting that's held for a couple of hours every quarter. That is an agenda that is agreed by DBT and the Post Office.
And if we just scroll down, we'll get a greater idea of those that are present. Thank you. And we'll see that you were present at this one. If we just scroll up, we can get the date. January the 10th, 2023. And can we go to page 4, please? Issues of note as required, including interaction with policy guidance. And the third bullet point, AC, I've forgotten who that was.
Alistair Cameron.
Thank you. Mentioned they are seeing a rapid increase in losses, including shortfalls of cash in branches. Post Office need to conduct a proper investigation and demonstrate whether the postmasters are accountable. However, it is difficult to conduct a proper investigation based on the Horizon data. And Post Office are not in a position to ask for the relevant money back in the current climate. It was noted as not a good time to prosecute postmasters due to the current historical cases, but this is seeing a rapid rise in losses for Post Office. MR's team, that's Mr. Roberts.
That's correct.
Are working on putting a new system in place. Mr. Roberts noted a helpful summary from Mr. Cameron and added that in particular the view and dispute buttons on the system are causing problems. Getting in contact with postmasters was highlighted as difficult, not always available. Post Office noted they can do more engagement with postmasters on the agenda for the next board meeting. Mr. Cameron raised that there are other solutions rather than going to the police. If postmasters are responsible and don't pay money back, there's the option to take it off their remuneration. Any solutions as to how any shortfalls that postmasters are accountable for can be recouped from postmasters aside from remuneration were noted as preferable. And then Post Office said, in cases where there is fraud, these could be tested in a civil jurisdiction. A paper on this was noted as being worked on currently and we raised to the government in due course. TC, I think that's Tom Cooper, the UKGI director,
correct.
And also the shareholder Ned, is that right?
That's correct.
Noted it will cause problems if money was deducted from postmaster remuneration without an investigation. And Mr. Cameron confirmed that no one is suggesting this. Noted a key issue is that the investigations are not being conducted in the most suitable way. Mr. Roberts' solution is a forensic process. Post Office noted that where full investigations are done quite often, POL does get the repayment. The issue is the investigation has to be good enough and that it is independent. The problem is that the data is not sufficient to do an investigation in many cases. And then you are recorded as noting, NR noted, that ultimately those who steal from Post Office will be prosecuted. So the questions arising from what was said by the various parties at this meeting, did you agree with Mr. Cameron that it was, quote, difficult to conduct a proper investigation on the basis of the Horizon data?
No, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think what he was alluding to was getting data from Fujitsu. I think that's what he's implying.
It's not what's recorded as having been said. It's difficult to conduct a proper investigation based on the Horizon data. The passage that's highlighted in the second bullet point down. Do you know why?
I'm sorry, I'm pausing because I'm just not sure whether or not he was in a position to make that comment. I mean, as in factually, whether or not that was something he was particularly aware of. I think we are confident today that we have a mechanism for properly investigating discrepancies.
I'm going to come on to that. This was January 2023.
Yeah.
And the CFO is saying it's difficult to conduct a proper investigation based on Horizon data. What's changed?
I think, certainly from the maturity of the teams that we've now got in terms of the way that we have organised our retail teams to investigate, we're much more confident in the way that we can go about an investigation and identifying, where there are shortfalls and where there are discrepancies. So I think we have matured as an organisation in terms of how we work with postmasters to identify what has gone wrong. I still think we have more to do. Invariably, we have more to do. But I think it needs to be recognised that this wasn't done properly and wasn't done properly for many, many years, and that's half of the issue. So building a team that actually knows how to properly interrogate and investigate Horizon data to come up with an appropriate route through is something that we are developing and learning and have been for the last 4 or 5 years. It's clearly the whole CIJ, HIJ findings, whether we just were not doing this properly. So we're making progress with this.
The third bullet point from the bottom ends in its last line as saying, the problem is that the data is not sufficient to do an investigation in many cases. Why was it the Post Office's position that the data is not sufficient to do an investigation in many cases?
I'm not sure of the genesis of that particular statement.
It seems to accord with what Mr. Cameron had been saying in the second bullet point.
Yeah, possibly.
They seem to be the same thing, don't they? Why was government being told it's difficult to do a proper investigation based on Horizon data?
I think what we saw at this particular time was an escalation in potential liabilities as a consequence of, losses were starting to grow in the network. And not unsurprisingly, the shareholder was asking why were losses growing in the network. And I think this was the conversation that arose as a consequence of that. I think that was the primary.
And the answer seems to be that it's difficult to conduct a proper investigation based on Horizon, and the data from Horizon is not sufficient to do an investigation in many cases. And I'm asking, was that true, and if so, why?
I have to say, that's not necessarily my my conclusion. I think with a growing number of losses, we were trying to scratch our heads as to why this was occurring.
That's a slightly different issue. I'm asking about why government was told, in answer to its reasonable question, why are losses growing, that it's difficult to conduct a proper investigation and the data isn't sufficient to do so.
It's not my understanding, certainly now, that is an issue for us.
But what new system was Mr. Roberts putting in place?
We do a number of things. We set up two particular schemes, I guess. We've been out to do effectively operational training. So we're going out to individual branches and doing operational visits to those branches. And we've also introduced an operational incentive for postmasters that is designed to encourage them to follow the operational procedures for daily, weekly, and month-end reconciliations. We've seen quite a significant increase since we have gone out with effectively a carrot option to try and encourage postmasters to follow the procedures correctly, which is what is happening. So we went out and trained effectively all branches individually through our area managers and our branch training teams, introducing them to and reminding them of how procedures should be conducted, what the mechanisms were for reconciliation, what the mechanisms were for daily, weekly, and monthly cash end of days, for want of a better word. And having done that, we then established a system whereby we are incentivizing all branches on a monthly basis to fulfill the process according to the operational manual guidelines, which is obviously something that hasn't happened. I think it probably plays to the comment about training at the start of the survey, that we have more to do in terms of training, particularly some of our older postmasters and some of those with longer service who perhaps didn't get the original training. I think there is a lesson in here that says we will need to go out in a more structured way to look at the older postmasters, serving postmasters. It was quite clear from this survey that those who are more recently involved in the recently joined the post office have had better onboarding and better training and better support.
What was the outcome of the paper relating to testing fraud cases in a civil jurisdiction?
I don't know the answer to that.
Is that something that is currently a planned route within Post Office for addressing alleged shortfalls?
I don't have detail on that, I'm afraid.
So you're not aware of any plan to use the civil courts?
No.
As a means of testing cases of alleged fraud?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Thank you.
So is it reasonable for me to infer that as of January 2023, that was thought of as a possibility, but it in the end turned out not to be?
That would be the case.
Since we're now in October 24.
That would be the case, sir.
Right.
Mr. Cameron is recorded as saying that investigations were not being conducted in the most suitable way. Do you know how investigations were not being conducted in the most suitable way at this time?
No, I'm surprised that Al had a view on that. To be honest, my understanding of what is going on with the retail team and how they are approaching the operational effectiveness of our branches, the way they do, as I said, the way they do training and support, and I use the word support advisedly, is markedly improved. And we can see that in the internal surveys that we've done with people who have experienced problems and issues and have got in contact with the branch support centre and or with the branch assurance team or the review and dispute.
Would you agree that an important, indeed essential partner in any investigation into an alleged shortfall is Fujitsu?
Yes, I would.
In paragraph 135C, I wonder whether we could turn that up, which is page 73 of your third witness statement. Page 73. And if we scroll down, please. And again. You say, from Fujitsu's perspective, I think they are suspicious of Post Office. And my feeling is that they consider some members of our board are, quote, anti-Fujitsu. Fujitsu recently sent Post Office correspondence raising concerns that they were being asked to give expert opinion in prosecutions against postmasters, amongst other matters. That was not the case, and we reassured Fujitsu that Post Office would never again prosecute postmasters, but we would comply with requests for assistance from the police or CPS if asked, which may necessitate assistance from Fujitsu. And then you give a reference to 5 lots of correspondence. Again, I think that the correspondence was born out of a suspicion and distrust within the relationship. It's also worth noting that Post Office has negotiated with Fujitsu a standstill agreement in respect of any potential legal claims it may have against them until the end of the inquiry. I think the correspondence that you're referring to there took place primarily between April and July of this year, is that right?
That's correct.
And it related to a criminal investigation being undertaken by the City of London Police.
That's correct.
In which the Post Office had asked the City of London Police to seek a witness statement from Fujitsu in relation to an investigation into a sub-postmaster. Is that right?
That's correct.
And Post Office separately asked Fujitsu to provide that witness statement.
Yes.
Can we look at some of this correspondence, the early parts of which you're not involved in, but the latter parts of which you are? Fujitsu 00243203. Can we start, please, with page 3? An email from Simon Odnall, the Horizon IT Director, to Daniel Walton, who is the head of the Post Office account, is that right?
That's
within
correct.
Fujitsu?
Yes, he is.
Dan, I understand from John that there have been some challenges with supporting an ongoing police investigation that involves a large sum of money. I obviously understand broader context, but wanted to reassure that Post Office is supporting the police investigation and offering any and all assistance we can. Can I ask that you help with any conversations that City of London Police need to have with Fujitsu? And then on to page 2, please. A reply, if we just scroll up, please. Thank you. A reply from Mr. Walton back to Simon Odnall, again copied to John Bartlett, who was the John referred to in the first email. Thank you for your message. As this is a legal matter, Fujitsu Legal are communicating with the City of London Police. I'm not involved in the discussions, and in any event, Fujitsu considers it to be inappropriate for Post Office and Fujitsu to be discussing a police investigation. And then page 1, please. And scroll up. Mr. Bartlett joins the conversation on the 19th of April this year with Christian Spelzini added in. One of my team has gone back to City of London Police to see how the contact you referenced below was progressing, as we have an open and objective engagement with City of London Police on this matter. City of London Police have informed us that they've not had any additional information or contact with Fujitsu after the single exploratory and inconclusive conversation. They left that conversation with the feeling they were indirectly being told that the Horizon system was unreliable, and so the case could not progress. We really need to explore this, as this is not the nuanced impression Simon Odnall has given me. As the potential victim in this case, the Post Office will be grateful if you can provide me with contact details for either of the equivalent person in Fujitsu to my role or an appropriate person in your UK legal team. I'll pass those details on to the City of London Police, who are looking to have a trilateral conversation. It's impossible to overstate how important this is. I need to advise both the police and the Post Office as to the evidentially established reliability or not of data that's being used every day in establishing outcomes with postmasters, and potentially to be presented to the criminal justice system by the police and the 3 public prosecuting agencies. The non-provision of relevant witness statements from Post Office and Fujitsu will rightly be interpreted by the police and prosecutors as Post Office and Fujitsu not having faith in the reliability of data, with the obvious outcome resulting. And so that's, it seems, where the matter ended on the 19th of April. I think the next step in the chronology is a letter from Mr. Patterson to you, raising concerns in relation to Mr. Bartlett's email of the 19th of April. Is that the first that you became aware of it, the Patterson letter?
Yes.
Okay. Can we look at the Patterson letter then? FUJ 0024 3199. This is a letter with which you'll be familiar, partly because it's been shown in the inquiry before and partly because you replied to it.
Yes.
He writes to you raising concerns about Mr. Bartlett's email and essentially makes it clear, is this right, that Fujitsu wouldn't support the pursuit of any enforcement action, criminal or civil, against sub-postmasters, at least by the Post Office.
Yes.
So if we just look at what's said, he is writing in paragraph 1 to raise serious concerns, which indicate the Post Office continues to pursue enforcement action against postmasters and that it expects Fujitsu to support such actions. And then this, to be clear, Fujitsu will not support the Post Office to act against postmasters. Just stopping there, did you and do you understand that broad statement to encompass all and any action taken against postmasters, whether by the police or by the Post Office?
That was my inference, yes.
The letter continues, however, we will not provide support for any enforcement actions taken by the Post Office against postmasters, whether civil or criminal, for alleged shortfalls, fraud, or false accounting. That may be a slightly narrower statement, limited only to Post Office action against postmasters.
I would agree with that.
Okay. He continues, in particular, 1, criminal investigations. We've become aware of a recent investigation by City Police. The approach of Fujitsu is to cooperate with the police and any other third party exercising independent investigative, prosecutorial, regulatory or judicial powers. However, we're concerned by the behaviour of the Post Office investigation on this matter. That team maintains an approach of Post Office as victim, in inverted commas, and requires Fujitsu to provide a witness statement as to the reliability of Horizon data, stating that without such a statement, the case will not progress. I think that is a fair summary of the Bartlett email, isn't it?
That is, yeah.
For the investigations team to act in this manner seems to disregard the serious criticisms raised in multiple judicial findings and indeed exhibits a lack of respect to the ongoing inquiry. Pursuit of shortfalls from postmasters. Post Office may be continuing to pursue postmasters for shortfalls in their accounts using Horizon data. We would have expected the Post Office has changed its behaviour in the light of criticisms and is appropriately circumspect with respect to any enforcement actions. It should not be relying on Horizon data as the basis for such shortfall enforcement. How did you react to that?
Badly.
Quite strong statement.
Badly.
Why did you react badly to it?
Because it's not true. We aren't pursuing postmasters for shortfalls. And I think the overall tone of the letter was incendiary and provocative, and that was certainly the reaction that it had in me.
Postmaster redress. Fujitsu recognise it holds Horizon-related information that may assist postmasters and Post Office workers to appeal convictions or seek appropriate redress including compensation. Fujitsu has and will continue to provide Horizon information, essentially to that end. He's asked Dan Walton to work with your team to ensure this change is implemented, documented, and reported immediately. Based on what I've heard and seen in the inquiry, there's a significant behavioural and cultural aspect to the Horizon scandal. As leaders of our respective organisations, I believe we're both committed to learn the lessons necessary so that this appalling scandal can never be allowed to happen again. Just shortly before the break, can I, for myself, ask some broad questions?
Yes.
Given the history of the Horizon scandal, do you consider that it is appropriate that the Post Office continues its investigative function?
Yes, I think we still need to have an investigations team.
But should the Post Office investigation team still be carrying out recorded interviews?
Perhaps not in the way that we are doing at the moment, but if they are, for the purposes of sharing that information, then fine. But in terms of I think the inference is that these are almost sort of police-orientated interviewing, then no.
In other words, you shouldn't there should not be an investigation by the Post Office which includes, in effect, an interview under caution.
Correct.
And the name of these things has been changed as assurance visits.
Branch assurance visits. They are very, very materially different. The only thing that a branch assurance visit does is count cash and count stock. It doesn't investigate. Investigations are done by a completely different team. So we are very clear that there is a separation of accountability here. The branch assurance team does stock checks for all intents and purposes, cash and stamps. The branch support and reconciliation team will help investigate what the issue is with in those particular circumstances.
This statement refers, in that second paragraph on the page we're looking at, to a change being implemented. Can you see that?
Yes, I can, yes.
What change did you understand was to be implemented? From what and to what?
I'm not entirely sure what change was being implemented. We've been extremely clear, and I was certainly when I replied to Fujitsu, that we aren't prosecuting, which was the major sort of consequence of this particular letter, but that we did expect them to support the police and the law enforcement agencies. I think when I take a step back, I would say we pay hundreds of millions of pounds to Fujitsu to manage our transactions, of which we do some 7 million transactions every single day. They manage our stock, they manage our cash, they manage postmaster remuneration, they manage the transactions with our third parties in and out of our system. I think it's entirely reasonable to rely on their integrity and the integrity of the system, given what we pay and what we get from them.
With that answer, can we take a break? We'll return after the break. But I think some email traffic that suggests that Fujitsu would provide a witness statement to the police.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What time should we resume, Mr. Beer?
25 to, please, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reid. Can we just go back, please, to FUJ 00243203? Do you remember this was the exchange of emails that you weren't copied into, which you said you didn't know about? before you came to receive the letter of the 17th of May. You'll see that this finishes with Mr. Bartlett's email of the 19th of April 2024, the Good Morning Dan email, which we looked at. Can we look now, please, at FUJ 0024 3158? And go to page 2 and scroll down. There's in fact an extension to this email chain, again emails that you didn't see, but I'll draw it to your attention. So you'll see that this is the Good Morning Dan email.
Yep.
And then if we scroll up to the bottom of page 1, you will see, just scroll down a little bit. Bottom of page 1. That's it, the Chris Breen, thank you. We can see a reply by Mr. Breen to John Bartlett's email. Dear Mr. Bartlett, so this is Fujitsu to Post Office. I've been passed your message by the team within Fujitsu that looks after the delivery of contractual services to Post Office in relation to the Horizon system. I'm a solicitor in Fujitsu's legal team. Please refer any further correspondence to me rather than Mr. Walton. I note your comments about Fujitsu's engagement with City of London Police, which are not accepted. Then over the page. It's not appropriate for Fujitsu to discuss with Post Office the nature and substance of its cooperation with an ongoing police investigation. Fujitsu will continue to cooperate with the police in relation to its ongoing investigation, or indeed any other, and it will not discuss the nature and substance of this engagement with others unless the police directs this to happen. And then top of page 1, please. A reply by Mr. Bartlett to that email. We've had a call with City of London Police following your email below. They'll be in touch to arrange the taking of a witness statement or statement. We'll be grateful for Fujitsu to extend any and all assistance to the City of London Police to aid their objective understanding and assessment as to the reliability of the Horizon system and the admissibility of evidence produced from it to the investigation they're conducting following the Post Office making a crime report to them as a potential victim. So taking the matter further than the exchange of correspondence that we ended at on the 19th of April, some further correspondence suggesting that there would be contact between the City of London Police and Fujitsu about the possibility of providing a witness statement or statements. We then come to your letter of the letter to you rather of the 17th of May. If we just go back to that, please, FUJ 0024 3199. The Patterson letter, as I've called it, and we read through that start to finish, including your reflections on some of it. Was this correspondence taken by you to the board?
I shared it with Ben Tidswell and the shareholder representative, I think.
What about to the board more generally?
No, I don't think it went to the board.
And why was that?
No particular reason. I think we've heard a lot about information that goes up to the board and information that doesn't go up to the board. There wasn't a specific issue. I wanted to be certain that the acting chair at the time and the shareholder representative were aware, and that was as far as it went.
Was this not significant information capable of impacting upon the integrity of the business, or at least a critical relationship for the business?
I didn't really read it that way, no.
You were, I think, frustrated or worse with what your partner was saying to you.
Yes, I was frustrated. Did that mean that I needed to alert the board to it? No, I don't think so. I think as I said in my witness statement, it's not an easy relationship with Fujitsu for a multitude of reasons. I think we all recognise and accept that, but ultimately my relationship with Paul Patterson is perfectly serviceable and transactional. I found this particular exchange a surprise, and I think, to be fair to Paul, he reached out and tried to see if we could resolve it, and I know Owen took him up on that. I think we moved on.
Didn't the position as described by Mr. Patterson have a considerable impact on the ability of Post Office to pursue or to report alleged crimes against the business?
Yes, I think the fact that my interpretation was that they were unwilling to stand by the integrity of their system and indeed unwilling, as I interpreted it, to engage with the law enforcement agencies, I was surprised. But having seen now some of the emails that I wasn't copied into, that's not the completely clear picture, I suppose. I think that they are saying that they will be willing to do that, which I think was encouraging.
If we scroll down in the letter, please, and under pursuit of shortfalls, it seems the Post Office may be continuing to pursue postmasters for shortfalls, and then the end of the paragraph, Post Office should not be relying on Horizon data as the basis for such shortfall enforcement. Does the Post Office continue to rely on Horizon data to pursue shortfalls from sub-postmasters?
No, it doesn't.
What about the experience of Mr. Jacobs, which rather suggests that it does?
No, I think the situation with Mr. Jacobs was exactly as we discussed and described before, which is we work with, once Mr. Jacobs had started working with the retail team, as indeed any postmaster would who had a shortfall or discrepancy, we will work together with the individual to see if we can resolve the situation. And I think, as Mr. Jacobs pointed out very clearly, once that process began with the retail team, he was very happy with the way that they engaged with him and the way that they supported and helped him to get a resolution to his problem.
I understood that it had all worked out in a business-like way once that two-way conversation had occurred. But it surely must be the case that the starting point was the data provided by Horizon. Otherwise, there would have been nothing to discuss. And I'm not saying that in any critical sense. No. I'm just trying to analyse what occurred.
No, I think that's fair. I think if you recall with Mr. Jacobs' situation, some of the potential liabilities went back a number of years, and so therefore it was difficult to establish quite precisely what had occurred, which is why we came to a situation where it was only possible to identify £16,000 worth of losses that he and we could naturally identify as being a problem.
I suppose it's as good a time as any to not ask you a question, but just make a statement, which is unusual for me. But I am a little bemused about all this debate about the reliability or otherwise of the current version of Horizon. Very early on in my role as chair of this inquiry, I said that the judgments of Mr. Justice Fraser and of the Court of Appeal were, as far as I was concerned, sacrosanct and not to be contradicted. Well, unless I'm misreading it, one of the conclusions which Mr. Justice Fraser reached was that the version of Horizon which was actually in use at the time of the trial, and I've forgotten his precise words, but this is my interpretation of it, was reasonably fit for purpose. I simply say that because we're having a great deal of debate about current Horizon, which at the moment doesn't seem to me to fit with one of the central conclusions of Mr. Justice Fraser's judgment in the Horizon Issues trial. And so I want to know where I'm going, having opened that up for you to all think about.
Yes, I mean, if I can be forgiven for offering
An instant report.
an instant riposte. He says, that is, Sir Peter Fraser, a number of things about current Horizon as at 2019, as disclosed by the expert evidence, including that it is relatively robust in inverted commas.
But these terms are no doubt wonderful for debate. But the general tenor of what he was finding was, as I've indicated. Now, I'm making no statement other than that. I have said that I regard what he said as sacrosanct insofar as it can be reasonably interpreted. And yet, inevitably, as it seems to me, there are streams and forces which are pushing me in a direction away from that on that one issue. So I just wanted everybody to remember what I've said and what he said.
Yes. You've told us that this wasn't taken to the board, this correspondence, but you, in fact, yourself replied. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can we look at the reply, please? FUJ 0024 3201. This is, I think, your reply of the 30th of May, top right, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
You say that Mr. Patterson makes a number of concerning statements about postmaster enforcement. We share a commitment to learn lessons from the scandal and to ensure that the appalling treatment of postmasters and the miscarriages of justice that occurred could never happen again. And scrolling down. The Post Office has invested significant time and resource effecting culture and procedural change across the business, taking on board the court's findings, ensuring that postmasters' interests are central to everything we do, and then taking points in turn, criminal investigations. I can reassure you that the Post Office is not now and will not in the future, I think, be undertaking any prosecutions against postmasters or any third parties as the prosecuting body. And then over the page, Post Office's requests to use Horizon data maybe for any number of day-to-day business reasons, including supporting sub-postmasters in their branches. In respect of enforcement, the requests only relate to cases where our teams are supporting criminal investigations or prosecutions pursued by independent third parties, such as the police or the CPS. These independent investigations may be initiated by a third party, by postmasters, or indeed by a member of the public, or by Post Office. Just stopping there, that doesn't bring into account the use by Post Office of Horizon data in its own investigations, does it?
No.
In response to the specific case you raised, potential criminal activities were identified in branch, and Post Office therefore reported the matter to the police. We have assisted with the police's investigation in including providing support, supporting data from the Horizon system. Naturally, it's vital to the police's investigation that it can rely on the Horizon data it's received. I'm happy you've confirmed in your letter that Fujitsu will cooperate with the police when it's exercising its independent investigative powers, as this case would require a statement from Fujitsu. It's a matter for the police and Fujitsu to determine the necessary content of the statement. And then, in relation to his second point, civil recovery of losses was stopped by Post Office in 2018. So Horizon data is not currently being used for civil recoveries from postmasters. Does that remain the case now?
Yes, it does.
Yes, thank you. However, Post Office does rely on Horizon data for a range of key day-to-day activities, including supporting postmasters with resolving discrepancies on their accounts. And then you set out how that happens. And over the page, please. Postmaster redress. the reliability of Horizon data is central to the compensation and redress scheme. I welcome your confirmations that Fujitsu will provide Post Office with information to achieve redress at no charge and provide a credit note for any prior charges which have been raised. Following this correspondence, this exchange of correspondence with Fujitsu, what was your view as to how any shortfall or discrepancy based on Horizon data could fairly be pursued by the business?
What do you mean by that particularly?
It's a deliberately broad question.
Right.
You've had an exchange of correspondence where Mr. Patterson has said, essentially, out of 2 of the 3 activities that he mentions, Fujitsu will not assist the Post Office in pursuing criminal proceedings or civil recovery. At the same time has said that they will assist the police.
Yes.
Or other third-party law enforcement agency. You've replied not addressing some of those points head-on, but explaining some assuring activity or reassuring activity that the Post Office has undertaken in relation to the first 2 categories.
Yeah.
Where did it, in your view, sit? What was the position? What could be done by Post Office after this exchange of correspondence?
It's a good question. I think there are a couple of things. One, I think we covered some common ground where law enforcement agencies and the Post Office and Fujitsu would work together when there were organised or large-scale fraud or issues. I think with the sort of specificity, your point is well made, which is if the police are able to rely on the data, then presumably the data is accurate, and that would be where I am, certainly. When it comes to the maturity of the organisation and to whether or not it is going to pursue civil actions against postmasters, I think, as I said at the very start of the day, I don't think the business has yet earned the right or the trust to do such things. I think we're still learning and developing how to help postmasters, both in terms of the quality of the support we provide and the quality of the training we provide. So I think there is still more to be done. Whilst at the same time, we have to get ourselves to a place where I think both postmasters and Post Office feel confident that we have done everything we can to ensure that the system and the training and the support is appropriate, and that's obviously what we're currently doing.
Mr. Patterson replied, can we look at FUJ 0024 3204? On the 8th of July 2024, replying to your letter of the 30th of May 2024, he explains at the end of his first paragraph that his previous correspondence was seeking to bring to your attention concerning conduct exhibited by members of the Post Office, and says in simple terms the Post Office is requesting that Fujitsu give expert opinion to be used in criminal proceedings against postmasters and Post Office workers. He says that you rightly note that the content of any witness statement is a matter between the police and Fujitsu. He considers it necessary to address the issue with you because the request was made by Post Office, and he considers the request to be entirely inappropriate, particularly in the light of the evidence being uncovered in this inquiry. He encloses with his letter an email chain. This is the email chain that we looked at before the break, which contains emails from a senior member of the Post Office's investigations team, Bartlett to Walton. Mr. Bartlett continues the prior narrative of seeing the Post Office as the victim and requests a witness statement to address, quote, the reliability of the Horizon system and the admissibility of evidence produced from it, and suggests that a failure to do this would be rightly interpreted by the police and prosecutors as Post Office and Fujitsu not having faith in the reliability of the data. He says a witness statement from Fujitsu attesting to the reliability of the system and of data from it in criminal proceedings would amount to expert opinion evidence. Fujitsu is incapable of providing expert opinion evidence, as it's neither independent nor has it sufficient information to provide such an opinion. As Post Office is well aware, there have been and there continue to be bugs, errors and defects in the Horizon system. Fujitsu currently has and has previously had access to branch transaction records, as your letter acknowledges the existence of other matters which could have operated to create innocent discrepancies in branch accounts, including miskeys or omissions when remitting cash or stamp stock based on Horizon data by end users. The Horizon system is reliant on the delivery of services by Post Office and third parties retained by Post Office. Therefore, records generated in relation to its operation are not exclusively retained by Fujitsu. The Post Office has appointed other suppliers to manage aspects of the system, such as network and end-user computing towers. The Post Office has insourced various services previously provided by Fujitsu and other suppliers engaged by the Post Office, including the help desk and integration services. And over the page. Fujitsu considers that all of the matters mentioned above would need to be investigated carefully by Post Office and the police with the assistance of an independent technical IT expert, possibly a forensic accounting expert, to ascertain proper explanations for branch account discrepancies. Only after such an investigation has been undertaken could a meaningful expert witness statement be made in criminal proceedings which address the reliability of the Horizon system. Fujitsu cannot provide such a statement. And so, just stopping there, leaving aside the meeting that took place on the 18th of July, what did you understand Fujitsu's position to be by this time, July the 8th?
Yeah, I think we're going around the houses a little, would be my observation. I think taking a step back, my expectation was there would be 1, 2, 3 maybe incidents, events of this sort of magnitude. That would require the police to engage with Fujitsu on very specific issues, and I don't think a sort of blanket expert statement was necessarily what we were trying to achieve. We were trying to achieve a situation where Fujitsu would cooperate with law enforcement agencies.
Just stopping there, sorry to interrupt
Yes.
an answer, which I'm conscious I'm doing. You said there would be 1, 2 or 3, or maybe I think 4 occasions on which, is that because of why is that?
Because of the scale of what we're discussing here, and I think I said at the very start of the day, our expectation is that where there is organised crime, where there's fraud, where there is money laundering, issues of that nature reported either by the Post Office or by the branch or by postmasters, they would be very, very small in number. And my expectation would be that Fujitsu would be willing to engage with the police on whatever it was that they needed. So I think there's a degree of cross purposes in terms of some of the engagement, and I suspect that Fujitsu felt that they were being directed to a degree by John Bartlett in terms of what they should or shouldn't do, and I think it's very much up to the police and FSL to decide what it is that is required or needed in whatever particular circumstance occurs. So I think there was a degree of cross purposes in terms of the engagement.
Even allowing for that, what did you understand Fujitsu's position to be at this point in time?
That they would engage with the police, but they wouldn't give a specific expert witness. And my understanding was that they would obviously engage with them, but they would engage with the police rather than Post Office engaging with the police and engaging with the FSL. Thank you.
The meeting occurred on the 18th of July 2024 at Wood Street. Can we look, please, at FUJ 0024 3206? This is Mr. Patterson's own note of the meeting. Opened with Owen explaining the absence of you, who were 100% focused on this. The COO joined the meeting, as he will continue in post. And then, rolling down the page, please, about the 5th paragraph on this page, to be clear, Fujitsu will not provide expert witness statements and will only work when requested by the police. Was that conclusion one that was fed back to you?
Yes, it was.
And then, if we carry on scrolling down, please. Over the page. And that's the end. That appears to be the only part that concerns provision of evidence.
Yes.
Is that right?
I think so.
Can you recall what else was fed back to you as a result of that meeting?
I spoke with Owen about the meeting. He said it was very cordial. He said it was that Paul was very reasonable in terms of the issues that were at play, that actually it moved fairly quickly onto the concept of an extension rather than being exclusively focused on Fujitsu's position with providing expert witness statements as stroke requests from the police.
Then I think Mr. Woodley wrote to Mr. Patterson essentially in response to Mr. Patterson's letter of the 8th of July.
Yes.
And following this meeting.
That's correct.
FUJ 00243209. Scrolling down, paragraph 1 refers to the Patterson letter number 2 and the meeting. There's a statement from Mr. Woodley as acting CEO of shared commitments. He says that he was concerned by some of the points raised in the letter of the 8th of July. There was some misunderstanding, having talked them through. Scrolling down under expert evidence, your letter said Post Office was requesting that Fujitsu give expert evidence. This was not the case. As you rightly say, Fujitsu is not able to provide expert opinion evidence as it's not sufficiently independent for any statements it may provide to be deemed expert evidence by the CPS. Post Office is aware of that and has not or would not request that Fujitsu provides expert opinion evidence. So there seems to be a meeting of minds there.
Yes.
Over the page. The investigations team has been supporting a police investigation into a significant financial crime identified in one of our branches. Data from the Horizon system has been shared with the police by Post Office. The police have raised questions regarding the data and the system, and the investigations team referred the police to Fujitsu as the provider of the system. The feedback that that's the police received in April 24 was that the police had only been able to have one conversation with Fujitsu at that time, and the investigation officer's impression from that conversation was they were indirectly being told by Fujitsu that the Horizon system was unreliable. As a result, the police told the investigations team the investigation could not progress. As a result, Mr. Bartlett sent the email of the 19th of April. He was not asking Fujitsu to act as an independent expert witness. He asked that Fujitsu engage with the police and provide a statement regarding the reliability of data. Fujitsu has confirmed it will further engage with the police on this matter. So that seems to remove, would you agree, some of the confusion, as it's been put, or misunderstanding.
Yes, I think so.
2, criminal investigations and prosecutions. There is essentially a restatement of what was said in an earlier letter under 1, 2, and 3. If we go over the page, please. To get the right checks and balances in any of these investigation processes, data will be required from Horizon, along with analysis of any known bugs, errors, or defects Thank you for confirming such data will be provided. We discussed the Post Office had used the word victim in correspondence with Fujitsu. While this may be a legally and factually accurate description, it does not reflect the change in the Post Office's attitude towards postmasters. And then 3 shortfalls. Thank you for confirming Post Office will continue to deliver its contractual obligations, including reporting promptly and transparently on branch impacting incidents. Next paragraph, whilst Post Office does not currently take civil recovery action to recover established losses, this may be necessary in future to establish a fair, transparent and consistent approach. This would only be undertaken in future with wide endorsement of the postmaster community and robust independent assurance. And I think you've told us today that that is not presently contemplated, is that right?
That's correct.
He welcomes the commitment that Fujitsu will work collaboratively with the Post Office over the coming months. And then lastly in this chain, FUJ 0024 3211. Mr. Patterson's reply to Mr. Woodley. It's unfortunate that Nick was not able to attend the meeting. The purpose of writing to Nick was to escalate CEO to CEO the concerns relating to certain behaviours within the Post Office. Post Office continues to have significant cultural issues, sees itself as a victim, with the enforcement and prosecution of postmasters considered as a business as usual activity of a commercial retail company. Fujitsu finds the language and the suggested behaviour unacceptable from Post Office investigators. I do not intend to engage further with the Post Office on the matters I raised. You will recall I've stated publicly Fujitsu does not wish to extend the contract with Fujitsu, and your letter has reinforced the challenges we have as an organisation with continuing to do business with the Post Office. So just stopping there, where did this leave investigations that were ongoing?
I haven't had an update. I'm not fully aware of what the next stage was, whether Owen responded to Paul, or indeed what the situation is with their support of the police. That hasn't been fed back to me.
What's the current state of play, therefore, in relation to obtaining evidence from Fujitsu in support of either investigations or in support of investigations or prosecutions being conducted by third-party LEAs?
Again, as I say, I haven't had an update since this letter, so I can't give you that answer, I'm afraid.
Was any of this correspondence taken back to the board?
Again, I'm not aware or whether it was or not, I'm afraid.
By you?
Well, it wasn't by me, no, because obviously as I've stepped back, because I've been working on this matter, this would be obviously an activity for the acting CEO.
Was the board, to your knowledge, aware of Post Office's involvement in the City of London police investigation?
I think, as we said at the very beginning, my involvement was certainly to bring the acting chair and the shareholder representative into the loop. I'm unaware of whether or not this was shared with the board in July or indeed in September.
Are you able to say whether the Post Office's current investigative function is fully compliant with all relevant legal standards?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
And what's the current position, therefore, in relation to obtaining evidence from Fujitsu?
As I say, I haven't had an update since this exchange, so I'm going back to what it said earlier in the email. I'm assuming that they are continuing to cooperate with the police as they said they would.
Can we look, please, at a separate train of correspondence, starting with FUJ 0024 3191. Starting with page 3, please. And if we just pan out a little bit, please. And scroll down. Thank you. It's an email from a Detective Constable Edwards in Lancashire Constabulary's Economic Crime Unit. And if we just look up, please, to the bottom of the next page. It's addressed to Mr. Morley, who we will in due course see is in the AC&I team.
That's correct.
Good afternoon, Andrew. So this is June 2024. Could I ask that you or your legal team provide the following? 1, documentary evidence which will confirm or verify that more robust, I think that's the more robust, Horizon Online was installed on the systems at blank post office from 2021. I appreciate your letter confirms the same, but is there any documentary evidence or records which show it was installed? As the letter suggests, are you able to get the ball rolling to prepare and provide a formal statement or report in an evidential format which shows why you believe the Horizon system in place at that post office was reporting correctly? CPS will inevitably want the same. And then scrolling up, please. Reply from Mr. Morley, a senior investigations manager in the AC&I team. While I work through the information required, can I request that response to item 1 and 2 below, in response to item 1 and 2 below, you obtain a statement from Chris Breen, who is the legal manager, Litigation Europe for Fujitsu. And then some details are provided. As you may be aware, Fujitsu are the company that supply the Horizon software and therefore best placed to address the points you raise. So this is the AC&I team directing the police to Fujitsu, asking for a statement as to Horizon's robustness and whether the system installed at this branch in, I think it was 2020 or 2021, was the HNGA system. And then scrolling up, please. You'll see an email to Fujitsu, to Mr. Breen. So the Detective Constable followed the suggestion made by the AC&I team. You'll see what is said in the first 2 paragraphs, which are sort of introductory. Are you able to assist by providing a written statement dealing with points 1 and 2 below? So it seems that Fujitsu is receiving requests for witness statements, or at least a witness statement from another police force, whilst the exchange was going on between those higher up the organisation, both in Fujitsu and Post Office. Mm-hmm. Did you become aware of this operation, which was called Operation Jetfire?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Were you aware of any investigation like this being undertaken?
No, as I say, I wasn't aware of this investigation.
You said earlier, and it's reflected in some of the written evidence, that board approval was required.
Yeah.
Board approval for what?
Sharing information, well, bringing to the table information associated with interaction with law enforcement agencies on specific issues.
And if we just scroll up, please. Thank you. You'll see this is the 24th of July, 2024, whilst the correspondence between you and Mr. Patterson and then Mr. Woodley and Mr. Patterson is ongoing. What steps were taken to ensure that those in the ACNI team understood the nature of the relationship and the limits of the relationship as between Post Office and Fujitsu on the provision of Horizon evidence?
Personally, I haven't been involved in that activity, but I would be. It would be obvious to ask the General Counsel who looks after that particular function to bring that to life. But I'm not aware of what kind of briefing they will have received.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 00243192? This is a letter to that detective constable, who on this version has been redacted. I think Post Office legal have reviewed the reasoning for not progressing to a charging decision. Scrolling down, not for Post Office to influence the independence of the investigation. However, the reasoning around the credibility of the Horizon system seems to be a significant factor. Just for context, this was a letter saying we're going to NFA, take no further action. Post Office have been asked to address 3 questions in respect of the decision to take no further action. Post Office hopes that the information provided below is sufficient to assist with the review of that decision. And then the 3 questions: New Horizon is much more reliable than the old system, evidence that a court has ruled so, and new system was in place at the blank Post Office, was installed there from 2021 onwards. And then over the page, question C is answered. The branch was operating the HNGA version of Horizon. And then questions A and B. This letter goes on for many pages, setting out extracts from the Horizon issues judgment of Mr. Justice Fraser,
right,
in answer to the question, which legal case establishes or proves that the current Horizon system is reliable. You see that? Is this an approach that you, as Chief Executive, knew was being taken? i.e. leaning on the Horizon issues judgment?
I was unaware of that. I'm unaware of this level of engagement, candidly.
I'm not going to spend time now going through all of the passages in this letter. It's there for the Chairman and others to read. You can see...
Maybe me to resile from or amend what I said earlier.
Well, I knew this was coming. You can see some passages which are, in my words, lent on. Extracts from, for example, paragraph 964 of Horizon Issues judgment, and the relevant passages are in bold. Findings in relation to Legacy Horizon from 2000 to 2010, and then of online from 2010 to 18, are not findings on the Horizon system as it exists at the date of the judgment. They cannot be routinely applied to the way HNGA operates as at December 2019. It's agreed by the experts Horizon system in its HNGA form is now relatively robust, hence my answer to the point raised earlier. And then carrying on over the page.
I can't help it. I love phrases like relatively robust. You could argue about them until 2030.
Yes, there's another variant on that theme, and it's in bold, 3 lines in, where Mr. Justice Fraser says HNGA is a different matter, and the experts are agreed it's far more robust than Horizon in earlier times. And then another variant on that theme, para 969, again in bold. Mr. Justice Fraser said, in relation to HNGA, the experts agree is a better system than either of the other two iterations of Horizon. And then carrying on, Mr. Justice Fraser's finding at paragraph 974 and 5 is set out. I have found that the system as it is in 2019 is far more robust than it was prior to 2017. And then the letter leans on some explanatory notes to the exoneration bill, essentially. Were you aware of this approach that was being taken?
No, I wasn't.
I.e., picking out some extracts from Mr. Justice Fraser's judgment as evidence of
I
the
wasn't.
current reliability of Horizon?
No, I wasn't.
Was that a board-sanctioned approach?
Not that I'm aware of.
Was it a general executive-sanctioned approach?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think it therefore follows that you didn't investigate or cause to be investigated the extent to which extracts from a judgment in civil proceedings could be used as evidence in criminal proceedings
No.
to prove the reliability of a system.
No.
Thank you. So that's the end of that topic and the end of my questions for today.
All right.
Can we reconvene at 10 o'clock tomorrow, please, unless you have any questions?
No, I have no question.
I could sense one brewing.
No, I was just, it's not a question. I was simply going to say that perhaps I should amend my statement to say that Mr. Justice Fraser's judgment will be sacrosanct once I decide what it means. Thank you.
So 10 o'clock.